call the work session meeting to order Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025 at 6 p.m. And what else do I
Just say, Sean,
say? Okay,
start talking.
as you all heard, we don't have our regular mayor person here, and he hopefully gets well soon. But right now, we're gonna let Sean lead us, so Sean, take it away.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to elect a chair pro tem for the purpose of the work session. Okay, we have to do this again at the regular session. Just to make sure we're perfectly legal and on record. So I will entertain a motion or a nomination for a chair pro tem to run the work session.
I nominate John Sandusky.
We have a nomination for Councilmember Sandusky. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any other nominations?
Oh, come on, please.
Word fashion.
Seeing none, we'll call the question, and all in favor of Councilmember Sandusky being chair pro tem for the purposes of the work session.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
You opposed, say no. Okay,
The ayes have it, that passes. Councilmember Sandusky, you're in charge for the next hour. But we'll just turn it over to me because I'm gonna talk for most of the next hour, so
okay,
does that work?
that works.
Okay. So the first item on our work session tonight is our police schedule discussion. And I'm gonna have Chelsea pull up our display here, so give her just a second to get the technology to work. You need to go back and pull a couple of slides. There we go. Okay, now I can do this. All right. So, as you are all aware, we recently had an officer leave our ranks to go to another job. This is a job out of state to be with family, but the genesis of this discussion was happening long before that officer chose to leave. The genesis of the discussion was started pretty much my first week here as your city manager. And one of the first things I did is I invited myself over to the police department and asked them to go through what they do and some of the data and what they're doing with calls and their operations and stuff. Because when I get to a new place, I want to learn as much about it as I can to know what's going on so that I can be informed on what's happening. So we are going to went too far. So this is your current staffing overview. We have 5 patrol officers, which is actually now 4 because one is left after we prepared this. 2 sergeants, we have a chief, we have a school resource officer, and a code enforcement officer. We do not have any detectives or lieutenants, and then we have 1 administrative assistant. Before September 1st, from 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., only 1 officer was on duty. And between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m., that officer was the sole law enforcement presence in the entire county. That's not good, right? I can't control what Tillamook County does with the sheriffs, right? But it is not fair to our officer and officers and our department to be the only law enforcement responsible for anything that happens in the entirety of Tillamook County over. So that was concerning to me. I had the police department go over their call and case volume for the last 3 years. What this is calls are actual calls for service. So when somebody calls 911 or the non-emergency line, that creates a call. Cases are those that are calls that result in a prosecutable offense where charges would be delivered to the prosecutor's office, and then the prosecutor's office, or in this case, the DA's office, would have discretion over whether to follow through with that case or not. So we can generate a case, but that does not mean that the case would be fully prosecuted by the DA because they have that discretion as DA's office. We have no control over that portion. Okay, does that make sense? We're on the same page? So over the last 3 years, we've averaged right around 9,500 or 9,700 calls per year. And those have resulted in the cases that you see there and the number of arrests. So you can see that for the last 3 years, those numbers have held pretty steady. But in the meantime, we've actually lost, Chief, I'm gonna ask, we've lost 2 officers during that time, or 3? In the last 3 years, we've had, what's the reduction been in the department?
No, we won.
Just the one that just left us, or, and then we had a couple of open spots, right?
Who else?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, I know, so yes, yeah,
We've lost 2 or 3,
technically two, yeah.
technically 2 officers. Okay, so we're doing more or the same amount of work with less people, is the takeaway from it.
Well, in addition, there was also, like, we don't have a records manager. We don't have an evidence tech, and we do have an executive assistant,
Yeah,
yet that person's doing the job at 3.
sure.
And so during, yeah, and I would say even from, no, that was 21. But
So recently, Chief Troxel had the Oregon Association of Chiefs of Police do an agency review. This was completed in the first quarter of 2025. The takeaway from this, and we have the full documentation for anybody that wants to read it, is that they have this equation for how we should staff our department. It's officers needed is the equivalent of volume of calls times call time plus proactive policing plus coverage factors divided by available hours. And the chiefs of police recommends that we need 15 officers or 15 FTEs for Tillamook City in order to be appropriately staffed. I'm gonna take this just a little bit further in that I believe, and this is my personal philosophy, and this is shown in best practices as well, that we should always have a minimum of 2 officers on duty as a national safety best practice. And we should be staffing based on workload, not just population. When I mean 2 officers on duty, there should be 2 officers patrolling the streets plus a supervisor, that would be a sergeant or lieutenant or the chief, that would be there to handle anything that goes on. So that's really 3 officers on duty at any given time. But the minimum should be 2. We should never leave an officer by themselves in the middle of the night. That is not good. That officer will be more reluctant to pull anybody over because they don't know what's gonna happen during that traffic stop, especially when there's no backup. It creates a burden on their families. It creates burnout when they're working longer hours. But really, it's just having that protection of knowing that they have a brother that is willing to be there in case the poop hits the fan. And this is kind of personal a little bit because in the last week, there was a shooting in my hometown in Utah where 2 officers were killed in the line of duty responding to a domestic violence call on a 911 handle. Now, this should have been just an innocuous call, but they showed up and 2 officers lost their lives. 3rd was shot and was injured in that, right? They were there just doing their job. And that's what these guys do, is they put their lives on the line. But we need to make sure that they're protected and have what they need. So we're gonna move on, and this is part of the analysis that the police department did. This is calls for service by hour. So this is over the last 3 years, so you can see the different lines. And during the 24 hours of the day. And what you'll notice is that during the overnight hours of midnight to 7 AM, not a whole lot going on over the last 3 years. We're gonna focus on the hours here. The bulk of the work that our police department does over the last 3 years happens between 7 AM and 10 PM. Okay? The hours of 3 AM to 7 AM are in fact the lowest number of call volumes that we receive at the Tillamook Police Department. Those are just the facts and the data. Additionally, the cases generated by hour, this is a similar graph, but we're taking the total number of calls and then we're turning it into the cases. The cases per hour during the hours of 7 to 10 PM are where we see the bulk of the work. The hours of 3 to 7 AM are where we see the least amount of time of work. Now, you probably already seen, because you read your memo in your packet, what I'm leading to. Looking at this data, looking at the staffing levels that our police department has used in the past. And the fact that we've had times where we've only had one officer on duty, I don't believe is the best practice that we should be offering for our police department and does not put them in the safest way to do the work that we need them to do. If we are going to do truly good police work, we need our officers to be available when the work is happening and when the needs are there. I want to point out to you, part of this analysis included a geographic analysis of where the calls are coming from. Our top 3 calls for service come from these 3 agencies, and I'm not trying to call them out or say that they're bad or anything like that. You can understand that Fred Meyer and Safeway, we have a lot of calls for service for theft. That is a large portion of what our police department does. With Adventist Health, it's assisting in their emergency room or when somebody's having an episode or something like that. So we're called in for those assistance type calls. Furthermore, in this analysis, what we're looking at is that we take the data and we kind of put them into 2 different buckets or 3 different buckets. So across the total incidents, 1/3 or the most frequent calls that we get are for theft or nuisance related. And when we talk about nuisance, what that means is suspicious person or unwanted person or trespassing at a certain place. That is what we see, is a full 1/3 of our calls for that. Now, that sounds low, but that is the most frequent thing that our police department deals with. The majority of the calls, everything else, falls into other categories, of being welfare checks or assists or disturbances or alarms going off, anything like that. But those are fewer and far between. We spend the majority of our time on theft or nuisance related calls, with the vast majority of those calls being the nuisance. Of those 1/3 of the calls that we take, 77% are nuisance related and only 23% are theft. Okay, so our police officers are spending a lot of time on suspicious people, unwanted people, trespassing people from these organizations. Does that make sense in the numbers? Okay. Want to make sure everybody's understanding what we're saying. So, again, across the top 20 locations, the most frequent calls are theft or nuisance. Most of those calls happen in the afternoon and evening. Thefts are more common during the shopping hours. We don't have people breaking windows to get into Fred Meyer to steal TVs. They're stealing stuff when the store is open. Same thing with Safeway. Suspicious activity and unwanted behavior are often goes to the evening. But we're seeing the data say that overnight calls are much fewer in them. We just do not have the need for immediate response in the overnight hours. In fact, during the overnight hours, our largest call volume is for false alarms. That means somebody's business has an alarm going off and we're going to check it to see why. And more often than not, that alarm is false. Do I have that right, James? Okay. So why are we paying a police officer to go and check on a false alarm at 4 AM? Okay. So what we are doing for the community. I would like to focus our officer presence during the times when issues are more likely to occur. We have already adjusted patrols so that officers are available when and where the community needs them most. That is during the daytime hours and especially in the evening hours. There is little anticipated loss of service by having coverage via on call of officers between 3 AM and 7 AM. What we have done, and per our town charter, our city charter, staffing and allocation of resources lies within the city manager. So this is not a city council decision, which is why we're bringing it to you during work session hours. We have, because of the loss of this officer, we have instituted a 28-day rotation for our officers. What this does is shifts beginning at 7 a.m. We will have the chief and another officer on duty. We have a midday shift and an evening shift, just like we always have. The officers will work 12-hour days, just like they always have. The difference being that between the hours of 3 a.m. and 7 a.m., because the data shows us that we don't have a lot going on, our average call for service during a month is 2. During a month between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m., we get 2 calls. Not 2 calls a day, 2 calls a month. Okay? So we are reallocating our police resources, and the way that this sets up is that the officer who is on duty overnights, they will get off at 3 a.m. and from 3 to 5, they will be the on-call officer. We have developed a matrix that is very similar to the sheriff's office matrix that creates a life safety situation that if a call for service does come in, that officer would be on call and respond to that call. Okay. Whenever a response call comes in during those times, we automatically have to send another officer out with them. So therefore, we would always have the 2 officers on duty to respond to those calls. It would be up to dispatch to make sure that the call that comes in meets the necessary criteria for that call. For anything that happens between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m., the officer that's coming on duty at 7 a.m. would take those calls as the on-call officer. By doing it this way, we are reallocating our officers into a rotational shift that allows for them not to accrue as much overtime, that allows them regularly scheduled days off that can help with some of the officer burnout that we've been seeing, and provides us with at least 2 officers, whether that's a regular patrol officer, a supervisor, or 2 patrol officers on duty at all times. It also allows for during the peak hours, the midday, the 4 to 10 p.m., we will always have 3 officers on duty. Okay. We worked this out with the police officers. This change did require that we enter into an amendment to our collective bargaining agreement, because the scheduling of the police officers is collectively bargained. We worked with the president of our Police Officers Association, Sergeant Carroll, to develop this plan. And I believe we have the support of the Police Officers Association for this plan. Is that correct? Okay, almost near unanimous, wasn't it?
It was you.
Okay,
Here.
yeah, near unanimous. There may have been one that forgot to turn in a ballot or 2. So, we have now, you're gonna tell me, Sean, we don't have a collective bargaining agreement in place right now, and it's true, we don't. Our last collective bargaining agreement expired on July 1st, or June 30th, I should say. And we are in negotiations with the police union on a new collective bargaining agreement. I believe we were somewhat close. We've had several meetings that have been productive, and we're actively working. The biggest delay to getting that CBA done is just waiting on the union and their representatives that have time to meet with us. Their attorney that represents them as their negotiating officer covers a lot of ground, and so we have to wait for him to be available. And we've met both virtually and in person. Our last meeting included some data things that the association wanted to go over, and we're prepared to go over those next week when Sergeant Carroll is back on duty. He's actually out this week, not supposed to be here, but we're grateful we're here. With that said, that was my report on scheduling. I don't anticipate we'll be much loss in service, because we weren't getting the service anyway during those hours. And this will be much safer for our officers, and we believe that this will provide better service to our public when we have officers that are not being burned out and stretched to the limits. As you can imagine, whenever we have officers that are sick or on vacation, The previous schedule caused lots of problems and cost the city a lot more money in overtime when we had to find people to fill those extra shifts. Okay, questions? I see Councilmember Torres, please.
So what happens when the bad guys figure out that there's no coverage between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m.? You got a plan for that?
When somebody calls 911, we will get a call, and depending on the severity of that call, if it's an active, life-threatening situation, we will respond. We do have officers that will respond as per the times we have, that we've dictated. So in effect, we still have 24-hour coverage. The difference is we'll see a minimal, additional response time during those hours, because that officer may have gone home. Now, my guess is that they'll still be in uniform and still be ready, because they need to be actively ready to respond to calls during that 2 hours. We just don't have them driving around in a truck, or in a car, or sitting at the police station.
Well, if your data points change, are you prepared to change the schedule and? talk to the union?
If the data points change, we'll have to have a larger discussion, but that will probably mean, and the fact is, we have this officer that just left. We do not have the money to backfill that position. This is actually saving a layoff next budget year in the police department. We do not have increased funding for the police department. We were likely gonna have to lay off an officer anyway. And so by not backfilling the position, we hope that we don't have to lay anybody else off. There is a bigger, much deeper problem with our police department, in that our city budget, the general fund, which the police department is funded out of, is $3.5 million. $2.5 million of that money goes directly to the police department and keeping that going, right? We have a serious problem between funding the police officers and getting a level of service that the council and the public may expect. Right? We've got to some point, put our money where our mouth is, and either fund the police department appropriately. And that may mean extra fees for public service, it may mean a levy, it may mean lots of other things that we can look at. But at our current funding levels, we cannot provide the level of service that the council has so far expected from our police department. And I'm not going to put our officers in danger by having an officer alone during those overnight hours when there is no protection for them.
When you say, appropriate funding, which we lack,
The answer to all your questions is money, Kessler.
yeah, does that take into account the need that's been apparently identified for us, that we need 15 officers? Or is it 15 employees? That's another question, but.
So it's 15 full-time equivalents. I'll let the chief talk about that more. We can go back to the staffing levels. That you see here. So if you add that up, 4 + 2 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, I feel I can include. We got there, so that's sad. 4 + 2 is 6, + 4 more is 10. So we have 10 of the 15. So we theoretically are 5 FTEs down. And those 5 FTEs would fill the positions that you see right now. You would extend.
Yeah, the 15 FTEs are the sworn law enforcement positions. Doesn't include code enforcement, doesn't include administrative assistant. And so that's 15 law enforcement from chief down. And right now, we're actually, I think the 5 is correct. We have 5, 2 sergeants and myself, so in our SRO, so we're at 9, we were at 10, we unfunded the 11th this fiscal. And so we were at 10 last month in August. Beginning September 1, we're now at 9, including me. And as city manager said, we're projecting for the 26-27 fiscal year, we would have to unfund the 10th position as well to be able to maintain the staff that we have right now.
Well, and I didn't even get into the SRO. In that during the summer months, that SRO is an active patrol officer. During this week, he transitions and spends his time at schools.
And we can, in emergency situations, we can utilize them to help cover patrol. And ensure that we're staffed if someone's sick, or they have court, or they're on vacation, or just need a day off. But that has to be used sparingly, because we do have an agreement with the school district that we will provide one full-time school resource officer, which, by the way, is needed. And if we didn't have that person assigned to schools and they were assigned to day shift, they would still be responding to the schools because of the number of calls for service that we have in schools.
When we did this data analysis, Sergeant Harold gave me, the schools, the high school and the junior high, actually, the junior high is in our top 5 of places we go, along with Fred Meyer Safeway and Advanced Health. The majority of their calls are juvenile calls, so they're broken out into separate bucket. I didn't want to include the schools in this analysis because that is just, it's a separate thing that we do, right? It doesn't meet the same criteria that these other calls do. So, and that's not to say that we don't do other calls, right? We want to focus on what we do the most in our police department. But they are still responding to domestic violence, to missing persons, to drug and alcohol offenses, everything, patrol, pulling people over, doing all the things that you expect a community police officer to do. We're just focusing on what the data says is the biggest things that face us here at Tillamook City Hall.
And currently with no detective, it puts us in a hard spot when we have a major crime. Because then it has an impact on our schedule, because it's difficult to pull a patrol officer or our school resource officer or a sergeant who has the investigative ability, knowledge, skills to do the work. But then we have a hole in our patrol that we have to cover as well. That's something that I'm constantly thinking of. And our school resource officer covers a lot of detective work. Officer Fitzgerald has stepped up and he's handling some of the other online tips that we get through the missing and exploited children. But having no detectives, and then I was thinking about that after we have 0 lieutenants. We've had a lieutenant, or a chief, lieutenant, and sergeant, or corporal, or 2 sergeants for a long time, many years. And so the responsibility of that lieutenant, because I was in that role, and the responsibility of chief for over a year, I was doing both, and we just kept it that way. But that's a lot, and I still want to get out and help on patrol, but there's so much administrative work that has to be done to keep the police department running as its own small business, basically, or yeah, that
Have we over answered your question, Councilmember?
You did wonderfully well, yes,
Okay,
but I appreciate the information, really. Sounds like there's needs around every corner.
there are needs around every corner, and again, the loss of the officer recently exasperated the needs. This is analysis that we're doing anyway, just to look at how efficient our police department is, what needs are, and what's going on there. The need to change the schedule from a full 24-hour office to where we have a 20-hour office with 4 hours on call was just exacerbated by this recent departure, and we feel like this is the best solution to solve that in the meantime. And to Councilmember Torres's question earlier, if the data warrants, I'm always welcome to look for other solutions and other ways to change. We had a 2-week notice period that we had to figure out a response soon. And it made sense to do it before the start of the month because we could start our 28-day rotation, which really becomes a 46 or 52-day rotation because you do it 2 months and get the officers on board so we could adjust the shifts necessary starting September 1st, because the police department has always and will continue to schedule their officers a month at a time.
So is this set of changes and hopefully improvements something the council needs to actually approve?
Nope.
So we're informed and we will assume you're doing it.
It started 2 days ago.
Okay.
As of the morning of August 31st was the officer's last day, and we put this rotation into effect officially September 1st and going there. So,
Okay, thank you.
and any other questions on that? The council have thoughts, I mean, you can tell me I'm wrong, tell me we're doing something awful. I'm open to it, but, as we looked at the data and looked at what we needed to do for the safety of our officers, I do feel this is the best response for right now.
Yeah, I support your plan. I like the fact that, you know, you're changing shifts, but you're not backfilling that position, because, you know, we should be cost savings right now.
Mhm.
And I do like the fact that not backfilling that position.
Anyone else?
Comments?
Okay,
Moving right along, looks like we have other things under reports.
yeah,
I'm not the mayor, so I don't have a report.
I did get a message that the mayor is watching us via our new YouTube feed, so he won't be, he'll send me text if he needs to say something, but we'll just keep moving on.
Okay. Then the next one in the list here is, reports from various departments of the city. Anybody want to go first?
Chief, do you wanna
I would love to.
give 3 minutes?
So this will be coming in your packet later in the month, but I will talk about August. Calls for service in August were at 1,120, so 1,120 calls. Total of 53 traffic stops, 59 citations, and something that I've asked when we're looking at the numbers is to break out citations, because citations used to be lumped with our code enforcement citations. And I think it's important that we as the department, you as council and the community understand there is a separation there, and we're doing a lot of work in regards to code enforcement. So there was 34 citations for code enforcement issued in August. And then we had a total of 14 physical custody arrests. In August, we had a great time, a national night out. And excellent turnout, over 200 people showed up because we had 150 burgers and 50 hot dogs, and they went like hotcakes, but they went like hot dogs and burgers. Officers and staff were able to connect with folks at the Tillman County Fair and Moonlight Madness. And we were downtown on foot, and Moonlight Madness, there was, I felt, last year and this year, there was a little bit more energy around it, and it was good. In fact, city manager got out and
We did.
took a stroll as well. We had coffee with a cop at Starbucks, and that's always a great time to go to connect with folks. And then city manager and I both were able to share some updates through KTIL Today Show. We were proud to be able to attend our hosting of the League of Oregon Cities meeting. Continue work on the Houseless Action Network, Deflection Work Group, and through our local public safety coordinating council, which is LipSafe. Let's see. Busy with fire defense board, working with county commissioners, public safety leaders at our hospital on ensuring, as you saw, hospital response is one of the top 3. And so making sure we have open communications with hospital administration, the sheriff's office, state police, dispatch, our ambulance service is really vital to make sure we're on the same page and they are as well. Code enforcement operations were very busy with an excellent response by fire department, our fire district folks, and the police department to a fire that occurred at the end of Fifth Street by Werner's. But what's really makes me happy is that our code enforcement officer, Kenny Moreland, worked probably a couple weeks before that on ensuring that Fifth Street at the end there started to just collect stuff, cars and junk. And so he went out there, tagged it, told folks he got to move stuff out of the way. Because the conversation we had was, hey, we gotta make sure this area is clear in case we have a fire. And then a couple weeks later, we actually had a fire apparatus, we were able to get in there and knock down that fire quickly. We've seen an increase in RV dumping, not dumping of poo or anything on the streets, but literally just driving up and unhooking your RV and walking away. We've seen an uptick on that, but also we have, we are on it, like a rat on a Cheeto. We're gonna ensure that that's not happening. And you just can't do that. And so we're happy about that.
If I can interrupt you and add, that's not just a Tillamook City problem, that is a countywide problem. Commissioner Fournier has been very active in saying that the county sheriff's office has more than 50 RVs tagged and deposited in their holding pen out of the port. And so this is not just an us problem, this is happening everywhere.
Yes. So I'm pretty proud of the police department as a whole, that we're working together to make sure that we're staying on top of that. The other piece that I think was important to highlight when it comes to code enforcement and other operations within the police department is our partnership with Public Works. Because without Public Works, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing to get this stuff, and our friends at Burdens. To get the stuff off the road, to include our downtown foot patrols, which have been a raving success in my opinion, based on what I've seen. And those who are downtown, who choose to engage in crime type stuff, they're choosing to move on. And I think that's great. And we might have to remind them of it, or we might have to do some other crime prevention things that will hopefully deter them to move on. But we obviously will come from a position of empathy, but we're not gonna allow this stuff downtown, period. Not gonna do it. Let's see. Officers, actually myself and both our sergeants attended a ballistic armor demonstration, which I'm really proud to say that I think most all of us have a new advanced armor that we, I think, kind of didn't even know that we transitioned to. But it is top of the line across the world. And I'm very proud that our officers are wearing this level of ballistic protection. And yeah, that was a great demonstration. Myself and our executive assistant went to the statewide criminal justice information training and making sure that when we are audited for all the protected information through CJIS, that we're good to go. And let's see. The city county insurance invited me to a statewide wellness committee meeting. And I was able to share the good work that the police department's doing to ensure, and scheduling is a part of it. Scheduling is a part of our wellness, our person wellness, our whole family wellness, and also the wellness within the police department. And when I say wellness, I'm not just talking about a buzzword. I mean, it's there's financial wellness, there's our spiritual wellness, there's financial, there's mental. And so really looking at that wellness wheel to make sure we're taking care of each other within the police department I'm super passionate about it and want to make sure that we're continuing to do that for all our folks in the police department. And so I was really excited that I was invited to share what we're doing. And to share the fact that I personally attended a 3-day wellness retreat that was hosted by First Responder Wellness, which they're known across the nation for doing really good work for our first responders, and they just work with first responders. And so I was able to share my firsthand experience going there and learning on all the different topics on how I can take care of myself to ultimately take care of everybody else within the police department as well. So that's a lot. But
Okay.
Wednesday in August.
Just before you sit down, just thank you to you and all the officers that are here tonight showing support, and hopefully we did a good job for you representing your interests, and we thank you for what you do for the city. It really does mean a lot.
Yeah, I think so. And that's the nice thing about it is that, you know, we have a good representation of the police department here tonight. And they, as Sergeant Harris said, the majority, if not everybody, is in support of what we're doing. It's gonna take a little bit of getting used to because it's a different style of scheduling. But ultimately, Officer Martinez told me today, he came into work with the thought of, oh, I got so many days to work, and then he looked at the schedule and realized like, wait a minute, I have the next 2 days off. Totally changed his whole perspective for the day. And so that was pretty cool to see. The instant, like, wait a minute, I got 2 days now that I'm gonna have off, I work 2 days, I'm gonna have 2 days off and. Anyhow, and every other weekend they get the weekend off as well, so that's somewhat unheard of in this business is. Every other weekend you have the weekend off, so.
Thanks, chief.
Thank you very much.
Move on to public works, is,
Yes,
Mr. J has a, other appointment we need to get into.
Yeah, unless you have any bigger questions, you probably got a chance to look over the report, I don't have anything particular to address with.
let me see, there, Derek, any questions for public works?
Nope.
Okay. And Nick, how about you?
No, I looked at the packet.
Yeah, packet had lots of information, as it always does. Sylvia,
I'm good.
okay? So we're supposed to let him loose to go do what now?
Well, it's a personal page, so, and he'll get that. I do have an update for the mayor, can I,
Okay.
usurp the mayor's report here? He says that he is happy with all the work being done with all the RVs that, Chief mentioned, and he's hearing a lot of good about it from around the community. And wanted to thank everybody involved, and I think anecdotally, we can say that, a lot of our detractors are pleased with the increased presence that we've shown in the downtown area. And so we wanna show that we're listening and that we're trying to make things better with the limited resources we have, but that would be another topic for later on tonight.
Okay. Any of the other departments before finance?
No, I don't listen.
Okay. With you, that's gonna talk about finances?
You guys have my report, it's not very exciting, because it's our first month in our fiscal year, and that's about it, is there any questions? Not a big exciting one, so,
Anything in particular in your report you wanna highlight?
no. Not this month,
Okay. Any
be
questions
a couple
for
months
Jay?
in.
No, no. Okay. You're off the hook. Anybody here who is the planning commission liaison?
We didn't meet last month,
Okay. And
we're not meeting this month.
the urban renewal,
I wasn't there, I don't know if you were young.
I was there and we just basically looked at some drafts of contract. Things that we would use and some of our deals, we have used them, but we're improving them supposedly. It's a lot of paperwork. Otherwise, nothing big right now. And we don't have a housing commission appointee here, isn't that Madeline, if I say it right?
Make
Megan, okay, sorry. Well, anything else you wanna say before we stop one meeting and,
No, sir, we can saunter for 10 so minutes.
okay? So, I'll adjourn this workshop meeting. Thank you all for being here and for all the great information. And we'll start back up at 7 o'clock. Right?